More than 50 years ago, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker declared the TransCanada Highway officially open. He told Canadians that the new highway would connect the country from coast to coast. Half a century later, the 7,800-kilometer stretch of road has lived up to its promise. The highway was designed to connect people and carry goods to markets across a vast landscape. Today, we invest in roads, bridges, and transit systems for exactly the same reasons: to connect our communities and foster great quality of life across the country. In Ontario, you can travel the TransCanada from the Manitoba border, through towns and villages, Great Lakes and small streams, over bridges and through wilderness, into big bustling cities and across quiet rural landscapes, all the way to the Quebec border. The TransCanada is a roadmap through the communities that make up our province. And each individual community relies on different types of infrastructure to make it a great place to live, work, and do business. These assets are critical to day-to-day life, so they must be kept safe and up to date. People rely on our roads and bridges, public transit systems, clean drinking water, waste pickup, parks and recreation services, and much more. How can municipal governments make sure that local infrastructure will serve their communities over the long term, just like the TransCanada Highway? You need a municipal asset management plan. Let's take a journey across Ontario on the TransCanada Highway and learn more about how asset management is your road to long-term sustainability. First, we'll start with the basics. What is a tangible capital asset?
Tangible capital assets are physical assets that we can see and touch.
Assets are things that provide value to the organization. So in our context, infrastructure is basically the value piece of the equation.
In Kenora, our largest ones are roads, bridges, our water and wastewater systems.
We have now collectively over 500 lane kilometers of Class 2 to 6 roadways. We have roughly 82 kilometers of water main, 71 kilometers of sanitary sewer, and just over 53 kilometers of storm sewer.
We have 5 water pumping stations, 62 sewage lift stations, and over 400 grinder pumps that we maintain for our water and sewer system. Also very expensive. We have City Hall, we have Rec Center, library, museums, the Ops building. Our rolling stock. Some people don't remember that. That's our trucks, our snow plows, graders, things like that.
Okay, we understand what an asset is. So, what is municipal asset management?
Well, in simple terms, asset management is doing an inventory or surveying what it is you own, where is it, what is its condition, and what is the useful life left in it. And if, when it comes time to replace it, what will the cost of that be, and how will you pay for that?
Municipal asset management is understanding the assets that the municipality owns and how they relate to the services that we provide, and the most cost-effective way that we can ensure that these assets are maintained to the appropriate level of service.
The basis of our asset management plan has been our tangible capital assets that we have already listed, what we own. So we started with that point and then looked at, okay, what would it cost to maintain these? When do we need to do certain activities? How much would those cost? When do we need to rehabilitate? When do we need to replace the assets?
The asset management plan, as legislated by the Province of Ontario, needs to include valuation of the assets, analysis of the risk, analysis of the financial shortfall, the environmental impact of the decisions, how we're using the asset management plan in budgeting and in daily decision making. It needs to ensure that we are making decisions based on the total lowest end cost, not on the short-term lowest cost.
How exactly does effective asset management support local infrastructure?
We've had an asset management plan since 2005. It increases the lifespan of your infrastructure. It reduces your costs of that infrastructure over its lifespan, but it also increases the amount of time that infrastructure spends performing well.
It also allows us to determine what level of service is best for the community, for our taxpayers, and what we can really afford to deliver at a reasonable cost.
It became clear to us that we have some work to do on better identifying what some of our assets are, especially the ones that are underground, because we have been a community that built for a number of years and then we retracted a bit in terms of size. So there was probably some projects undertaken that weren't as well documented as they could be. So through this asset management plan, we became aware of that and the need to have more detail and more research done on what assets we have, what their condition is, and where they are.
Now that we know what municipal asset management is, why is municipal asset management so important?
We're stewards of the public. They provide tax money to us, and we're also providing them services with their assets. So we need to give them good value for their money.
It also, I think, helps establish priorities, and as far as administration, city administration, it certainly gives us the answer to residents and to councillors when they're asking, you know, when's my street getting done, or why isn't my street getting done? Because we have a plan, we know how our infrastructure is performing, and when we need to rehabilitate and reconstruct that infrastructure.
We have a tendency to take a look at infrastructure, probably at roads and bridges, but there are many other infrastructure needs that we need for the everyday living of people in our community. It's an exercise that everybody within the community, to have a say in what they would like to see when we set up our infrastructure asset management plan.
We understand what asset management is and why it's so important. Where does the Federal Gas Tax Fund fit in?
In Ontario, there's $744 million that's available to municipalities, and that's based on a per capita basis. So it's not a lottery funding type system. You are funded given the number of people in your community.
Federal gas tax funding is stable, it's predictable, it's long-term. That is a big benefit to municipalities because we know what's coming.
The Association of Municipalities of Ontario delivers the fund to municipalities on a per capita basis. Local governments know how much funding they will receive ahead of time so that they can budget accordingly. So it certainly is important with asset management to be able to know how much money you're going to have in following years, not just this year's budget, so that you can plan that work ahead of time and know that you'll have dollars available for that.
The gas tax is also unique in that we can borrow against it, we can pool it, or we can bank it.
The Federal Gas Tax Agreement requires that all municipalities have an asset management plan in place by December 31st, 2016. Your plan should include all infrastructure categories that are eligible for gas tax funding. You can use gas tax funds to pay for expenditures related to developing and implementing your asset management plan.
The asset management plan should always be considered as a living document. It has to be updated on a regular basis. What you've achieved, once that has been achieved, there's got to be something else that can be added to the plan. If policies change, that should be updated. So it should be reviewed on an annual basis, and I really think that it should be reviewed and revised in great depth every 5 years. The City of Temiskaming Shores Asset Management Plan was actually developed in-house. I was the lead on the project and utilized a lot of our engineering people, a lot of our staff and resources to gather that information, create our inventories, and work forward to come up with a final product that was presented to Council.
So what we've seen is, as we're moving and maturing, is a lot more elements of the organization that are now part of the asset management process. It's not just about engineering. It's not just about the finances, it's really about everybody that has a stake to play in the role of those assets to help to support the services that we're providing. Elected officials are the decision makers. So at the end of the day, they're the ones really providing the leadership around supporting the asset management plan. And asset management is providing a long-term view of what's required to sustain assets, because these assets have long lives.
The asset management plan was legislated to be at least 10 years. Ours actually goes out 40 years. A lot of these decisions impact the future and the far future, not the near future. We need to be making decisions now about total cost of maintaining an asset, and that's total cost over the asset's life, not over a term of council.
To be effective asset managers, elected officials must make decisions that balance maintenance and repair with building new infrastructure while still meeting community need.
That it's an opportunity to have a discussion between number one, mayor and council, the cities, all their departments, from transit to public works, parks and recreation, and very importantly, with the citizens at large.
Assets only exist for one purpose, and it's to support the delivery of services. Really, the investments that we're doing are really to help to support those services, and we can see basically the significant returns that we get from those investments.
Provincial and federal coffers are not flush with extra money to renew all of our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is old, some of it's decaying. We need to make the most informed decisions that we can now more than ever.
Canada's population has almost doubled since the TransCanada Highway opened in 1962, but the highway still lives up to its original promise. Our local infrastructure must be able to do the same, and it will take good asset management planning to make it happen.